What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Taking Flight podcast. I am your host, Erik Kostelnik, founder and CEO of Postal. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing go-to-market leaders and founders who share how they've grown their careers, how they approach new roles, and experiments and creative tests they've run to help their businesses take flight. As we chat, for every question, they'll be tasting items from a featured flight that's sponsored by a vendor from the Postal Marketplace. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, this is Erik Kostelnik, and I'm joined here with our guest Seth Shaw for the first episode of Taking Flight from yours truly and Postal. First, we're going to do a shout out to our sponsors and our vendor of choice for our first episode. This happens to be one of my favorite in-town vendors here in San Luis Obispo. This is Rod & Hammers, which is a new distillery that opened up that does California whiskey. So today, as a part of our first episode, we're going to do flights of whiskey drinks.
Yay!
At 10 o'clock in the morning. So thank you to Rod & Hammers. All right, so we're going to start off with the first question that we're going to ask, but we're going to get into a whiskey Mai Tai, which is a rye whiskey base, and Seth required that we have ice cubes.
Yeah, I required. I had ice cubes.
Yes. It's probably going to be a good idea. By
Suggested you drink it straight.
Yes. Well, it's a nice color.
It does smell pleasant.
It is nice. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So we're going to get into it. That's good. Fruity. Like a good breakfast drink, maybe?
Oh, yeah. That was Meg's.
All right, man, let's get into your career. First question is career-based, right?
Okay.
So we know each other for a while, fortunately, unfortunately.
Yep.
Tell me about your career. Tell everybody about your career. You've been a pretty impressive, expansive career, and you were able to do a lot in the last 20 years. So let's hear it.
I appreciate that this is the first episode. So This is like setting a benchmark.
That's right.
So nowhere to go but up from here.
Right.
My career, I'm an accidental salesperson. I had my first sales experience in college. I was selling books door to door.
Nice.
In Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I'm from California and went to school in Santa Barbara. It was a trying experience, to say the least.
Yeah.
A lot of doors slammed in my face, a lot of rejection.
How old were you?
19.
Nice. Were you going to school out there? How'd you get out in Wisconsin?
I drove my 1985 Honda Accord to Nashville, Tennessee. Went to a sales school, but this was part of a program for Southwestern Company.
Okay.
Which was just kind of known as running this college program for people over summer to be able to make money. So the whole thing is they get you out of where you're used to spending time.
Yeah.
And they put you in this kind of remote location where you have no other alternatives to work. And so I was spending 18 hours a day, Monday through Saturday, taking a day off on Sunday, knocking on doors.
Wow.
And it taught me a lot about like the process of selling, how to do territory management, how to do pre-approach. Came up with a lot of sayings like be funny, make money. And I tell you what, that summer it was a lot of learnings, but like an emotional roller coaster to the point where I was like, sales is definitely not for me.
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple of years, graduate from university with a poli-sci degree. Thought I was going to go work for the State Department.
Like
Jason
CIA
Bourne.
stuff?
No, more like just working at a foreign embassy.
Okay.
I was like infatuated with traveling, spent a bit of time in South America. And the first job that I could get was working as a support technician for a technology company. Literally learned C++ programming.
Wow.
Was typing support tickets. Pretty much hated my job because it was just boring and I wasn't interacting with people. One day the CEO comes to me and basically was like, hey, you should get into sales. You have the personality for it. I shared with him my experience in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
He was like, B2B sales is nothing like knocking on doors. Get over yourself. It'll be fine. And that pretty much launched my career. I was a field salesperson for a number of years. Most formative career experience was joining a company called LogMeIn. My mentor, Kevin Harrison, was the VP of sales there and was just like, they're doing this thing called product-led growth. Actually, they didn't even call it product-led growth.
This was like 2008?
This is 2008.
Yeah.
And this was like They had application service providers. This is pre-SaaS
Right.
really being a thing.
On-prem.
But this was the difference. We were not on-prem. We were this hosted connectivity service that allowed two computers that were connected to the internet to bridge this connection. They had this point-to-point connection technology, and they built the first kind of freemium business model where we gave this product away for free.
Right.
And it created this massive amount of inbound volume and allowed us to be able to segment that traffic into different populations that we could sell products to.
Yeah.
And
super high growth, grew through the recession,
went public. I had an opportunity to move to Australia and open an office there. I had an opportunity to run the international business from Amsterdam, was eventually promoted to be the global head of sales and support, and was an executive officer in a public SaaS company at like 31 years old.
Yeah.
And I was terrible at my job.
Yeah.
Like I literally
don't
did not.
think that, but yes.
I mean,
you could have been better. You could have been more experienced, but like, I'm guessing you weren't terrible.
I understood our customers and I understood how we made money.
Yeah.
But I didn't know the job of being effectively a CRO,
public
company
CRO.
head of revenue, and the different disciplines.
Or if you wanted to do that.
Or if I wanted to do that. I mean, it's one of those things where I think when you get into these situations where the next piece of cheese is in front of you on this kind of maze of a life that we're running on, like there is no doubt that you're just like, yeah, I could do that. Like I should totally do that.
Yeah.
And it's probably a little bit of like ignorance to like the downsides of doing those things, as well as the competitive drive that I think everybody that's kind of in this like sales profession, business profession,
we want more.
We always want more. We always want to try something new. So anyways, looking back on it now, it's funny because I've just learned so much more in the kind of nest set of experiences that I had. If I could have done that one over again, there's so many things I would have done differently.
Yeah. And then we met at Wrike. So you recruited me as the CRO of Wrike to come over and help you build out the sales org. That was early days. That was 2013.
Yeah.
Right.
We were just about $3 million in revenue at the time.
Yeah. That was a great business, man.
It was a lot of fun. Andrew Philo, the founder and CEO, was a technical visionary who built a really interesting product for basically online project management.
Yep.
And like the competing alternatives are like Microsoft Project and a few other SaaS solutions. But for the most part, people were not organizing their work in a formal system.
Yep.
So we were replacing things like emails and spreadsheets and Word documents and stand-up meetings. And the challenge for us at the time was we have all these people that are interested in the product. How do we turn that interest into actual paying customers?
I mean, when I joined, we were at roughly 18,000 free trial leads a month, right? So we were, and we had a sales team at the time of like 5 people. So when you think about, and now, when I left and you continued on after 2 years, we had like 200 sales reps. We had a huge CS team. It was, and we were part of the Deloitte, Fast 500. Like it was an experience, to say the least. I mean, we did a lot in those 2 years. When you think about the next phase, and we're going to get into process and we're going to get into more drinks, but when you think about the next phase of going from Wrike, which was that just lightning in a bottle, it hit, we had all the right process, all the right people, and we went, and it eventually became a multi-billion-dollar company, into something like Invision and then Airtable. Let's talk a little bit about that transition, because I know that those two next roles weren't exactly like our experience at Wrike.
Yeah, it's funny when you're going from like working at a public company at LogMeIn to then being like, okay,
I'm $3 million revenue.
I'm going to like completely go away from all of the luxuries of a public company, like predictability, all the systems are in place, like how you model and measure the business, the right type of people to hire, the like budgets that, are a mile long. And you think about going to a place where it's like, hey, we don't even know if this is a real business or not.
Right.
We know that like there's interest here, but we don't know if people are going to pay us. We have $2.5 million in business.
Yeah.
That requires a certain amount of like humility that you're not going to figure it out. And so my default setting when I joined Wrike was always like, I don't know if we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that was really,
it's hard to be a pessimist when you're an optimist as well.
It really is. Like for me, I was looking for the reasons why this wouldn't be successful.
Right. And that's forced.
And
because you're a salesperson. You
yeah.
believe you take a job, you're like going to sell stuff.
We're going to crush it.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, like the pragmatist in me who was like thinking about my career as almost like, you know, a stock portfolio. It's like, what stocks do I want to own? Like, what companies do I want to associate myself with? And you're just like, can I actually bet on this thing being an undervalued asset? And that's where you get into like, here are all the reasons it won't succeed that put you in a position to like start building your list of things we have to figure out
right.
to be able to be a successful business.
Right.
And for me, the pattern recognition was, okay, at Wrike, we had all this inbound interest, but our conversion to paid customers was pretty mediocre.
Right.
Like 1-2%.
I was going to say it was along those lines. Yeah.
It was pretty low. And so it was obvious when you started to like spend time with the sales reps who were all like incredibly smart, well-motivated people. Like Andrew, when he built like the initial 3 sales rep team, had like great like athletes, like really intellectually sophisticated folks that could figure problems out, but there was no consistency.
Yep.
So it was just like, okay, here's the obvious thing. We've got to figure out how to get to consistency. And that's when you and I spent a lot of time together. But as I went to places like Invision, where it was like at $30 million, like the consistency was set.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were past this point of, is this thing going to be a business or not? And they were very much to the point of, how do we actually go from $26 million to $100 million? Like so that journey is different.
This is a perfect intro to the second question and second drink. So
yeah,
we're going to keep
and
rolling.
You finished your first drink.
It was delicious. Yeah. This is Rod and Hammer's Slow Stills Whiskey Paloma.
What?
So this is a Paloma made of whiskey. There's a lot of hesitancy around this one, so we're going to
understand this.
We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's it's grapefruit color.
Yeah.
All right. I'm actually jealous of your ice cubes at this point.
Fun fact, the Invision colors were hot pink.
Oh, there you go.
So
very
totally
fitting.
Appropriate.
Very fitting. See, I like that better than the Mai Tai. That's actually nice. That's weird. That's weird that's good, actually.
Yeah, it is much better than I thought it would be, and it's even better over ice.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into process now. So a little foundation, you know, how you built your career, like what you're interested in, what you did, how you got to where you are. But as we start to think about like your movement from Wrike into Invision and then into Airtable, and now as a board member and as a consultant and looking for your next thing, you have to have a process of when you go into a business and you evaluate that I'm going to spend my next 2 to 5 years in this business.
Yeah.
Like, is number one, your process of deciding when you're going into this business, like what is that process that makes you excited and want to invest your time? And then the second piece of that is actually, what do you do when you get into that business to evaluate what you need to do?
Yeah.
So I'd love to explore those two
so
concepts.
How I've always found kind of that next opportunity to invest my time in, I think this definition has evolved, but I think it's probably similar to how a lot of people think about it. It's like, look, life is too short.
Yeah.
If you're not solving a problem that you think is like interesting, that you can wake up every morning grinding on, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And so like, that's the lowest level of decision criteria for me. The second thing is, who are the people around the table? Because the people make a disproportionate difference in the outcomes of these companies. Who's the CEO? What is that person's vision? Why do they do what they do? What's their interest in driving a commercial success relative to a personal success?
Yeah.
And like you just get better at doing those types of things. And then the last thing is like the economic opportunity. Like, is this an undervalued asset? Do I see a path to this being, you know, $100, $200, $300, $400 million in revenue business and the commensurate valuation that would be hopefully traded at one point in time for actual money?
Yeah.
So that roughly is how I go through and assess whether or not it's something that I want to spend my time doing or not. When I'm going through the process of talking to a company, usually you have a pretty good idea of what the product is, like what is its objective function, what problem does it solve, and what is the business model? Like, how do they go about solving that problem for customers, whether it's via a SaaS solution that looks at like a PLG product or a freemium product. Over the last call it 10 years, I've really been drawn towards PLG companies because I believed, and I still believe, that buying has fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
That there is an expectation that a buyer has the ability to understand the value of the product before they purchase. And if you think about the traditional world of a lack of ability to do that, packaged software or hardware, those types of things, there just aren't that many examples left of successful companies that have the ability to do that. Now, it's got to
be, the category has got to be defined, and it has to be widely adopted in order to get there as well.
Yeah,
right?
There's got to be enough interest in the marketplace for a solution to this problem.
Right.
And people have to be actively looking for it, and they have to be interested in seeing that solution.
Yeah, like hence why Calendly did so well.
Of course.
People were like, why doesn't Google let me share a link to go book meetings?
Right.
And that was it. That was fundamentally what they did.
Right.
And it's like,
which is still a great open question. Why doesn't Google allow you to be able to share that link?
I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But big companies are interesting places. At the end of the day, when you're going through this process of doing this assessment, you have a pretty good idea of here's the business model and here are the typical flaws that business model has.
So you're in there when you're doing the work and you've decided this is the gig, and you start the gig, and you go, great, I've already crossed off the checklist of, do I believe in the founder and the idea, in the market, in the product?
Yeah.
And then what do you do?
Yeah.
You're in there.
So
what do you do?
Here's the example, Invision. I fell in love with the space, had this premise that designers were an underappreciated category of software developer, and
Absolutely.
they were going to have disproportionate impact on future companies.
And Adobe owned the space, and it was like,
Adobe
why is there not
and
more?
Sketch was this screen design tool that everybody used, but
it was like 5 years ago.
It's like six, 7, something like that. Yeah. So like when I joined the company, we were great at selling prototyping, right? That was the objective function of what Invision did.
Yep.
It was like, stitch all these screenshots together, make this interactive experience, use that to be able to like sell to VCs, the idea behind this, product, or to sell internally how we should evolve a product. And what became pretty
user
clear,
testing, all of
those things. What became pretty clear was like that functionality of prototyping that has features associated with it and like ways people use it was actually an on-ramp to a much larger problem, which was collaboration around this design asset to be able to shrink the amount of time that it takes from designing something to building something, and doing so in the most efficient manner possible. And if you think about the difference between selling a prototyping tool and selling a solution that allows you to be able to shrink the time from ideation to development, they're kind of two different problems that have to be sold at different levels in the organization. A prototyping decision is made by a single person. What prototyping tool do I use? A decision around how we as an organization collaborate around building an amazing product, it's an organizational problem that needs to be sold at a different level within the organization.
So your ICP, so part of the process of going into specifically Invision, and I'm sure you see this, I saw this at Airtable as well, is that you go, okay, who is my true ICP? And from the beginning of you helping us out at Postal, it's always been like, who are the main users, who are the buyers of this product, and where do they see value?
Yes.
And so in the instance of Invision, to where you have a $30 million revenue business, they built the foundation of that business on the users, right, on $99 a month deals.
Yep.
And you go, wait a second, this actually, in order for this to be a big company, it's got to be the whole entire team.
Yep.
So you've identified that.
Yep.
What do you do after you've identified that? What happens then?
Usually that requires a pretty significant change management effort,
right, because that's you're a CRO, and the founder's like, did this thing, and
I mean, what helps is usually your founders are trying to figure out how do they build the most valuable company possible.
Correct.
So like they're usually not pushing against this idea of like, let's extract more value for what we're actually building here and what we've actually developed.
Right.
So part of my job is to be able to paint that picture of the larger value that we could be capturing. Right. So in the case of Invision, it was like, okay, look, we have to get out of the business of selling feature function based prototyping tools and get into the business of selling the outcomes of solving this collaboration problem around how you go from design to product. And that was how do we install a sales process and a methodology that like that lines up to that.
Sure, top
for
down,
us,
right?
At the end of the day, we have to change kind of hearts and minds within our buyers to kind of reprogram how they think about us from being this prototyping solution to this collaboration solution.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time looking at different sales methodologies. We ended up building our own, but it was based roughly around the challenge sale.
Yeah.
The idea that there is this big macro change, that the winners and losers in the future of business will be determined as much by the digital experiences that they have as the physical experiences that they have between themselves and their customers. And that if you can win those digital touch points, you're going to get a disproportionate amount of the spoils of any category. And using the examples of why is Airbnb's market cap bigger than Hilton and Marriott's combined?
Yeah.
Well, the reason is they built a better business based off of being this digital native company. And the beautiful thing for us at Invision at the time was we had this great platform for being able to tell a huge business transformation story. Imagine being able to go into Marriott and have a conversation around the practices that a company like Airbnb uses to be able to build amazing digital products.
Yeah.
Like, here's how you set up your team. Here's how you should think about goaling those folks.
Yeah.
Here's how you should coordinate between each other. Being able to kind of lay out the roadmap for Marriott to know that they could build just like Airbnb.
Yeah.
People are willing to pay a
Sure.
lot of money
Yeah.
to have have the market cornered on a specific process, but they're willing to spend even more money to be able to catch up with their nearest competitors and potentially supplant them.
Right.
And that's what we were trading on. And that allowed us to be able to pretty quickly in the course of, 2.5 years, go from sub 30 to $100 million in business.
Yeah.
So it was a really great motion.
Were you spending, was it more money that you were spending to get there when you think about scalability? Like, of course, you guys raised a tremendous amount of capital and you had access to that capital because of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about the unit economics as you started to grow that business, the next question that we're going to have in the next drink is going to be around measurement and actually how you get to a point. So why don't we do that right now? Because we got 10 minutes left. We're going to go to our next drink right now. This is Rod and Hammer's Whiskey Margarita.
Whiskey Margarita.
So we're going to continue down the
tequila whiskey theme.
The tequila whiskey theme. And this is, I'm a little nervous about this one, but my guess is it's going to be yellow. Oh, it's horrible pour. Oh, yeah, look at that. Looks nice.
It looks like a margarita.
It does. Honestly, you can't really tell it's like whiskey either.
They kind of smell like what they're intended to smell like.
They nail the profile of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it could be, I'm guessing this is not like brown whiskey. This is probably unaged whiskey.
Yeah, steel tank.
Steel tank.
Yeah.
White Lightning?
I don't know. Definitely not port barrels.
See, that's not bad. This is like 22 proof too. This is 11% alcohol.
Yeah, I don't know that I would buy that one.
I
think they could keep trying.
I
like the Paloma. The
Paloma's there. The next one's going to be interesting. That's the Whiskey Mule. I think that's going to be my favorite.
Okay.
All right. So, as we're getting into kind of the where you are now, we're still in this, you have this process of identifying the company, you have this process of identifying what you need to do, and then you start to measure. And so what I was starting getting into was, so you're measuring, how do you measure the scaling? Like, how do you make sure you're still on the line of that the things that I'm doing are working and they're not breaking the ship?
Yeah.
And what are the most important things that you think about when measurement?
Especially for recurring revenue businesses, there's really three things.
Okay.
The first and most obvious is net new customer acquisition. Like, are we winning more new customers as a result of this change of strategy? Do we see evidence of our core ICP, not all companies, but the ones that we believe are the right ones for us to focus on, being attracted to our message? And so that's pretty simple. You put it yourself in front of, let's say 50 companies in your core ICP in the last quarter. We closed 40 of them. Our win rate is this. The sales cycle is that. It's all the basic blocking and tackling associated with running a net new customer acquisition machine.
Yep.
That, I think, is pretty uncontroversial. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Either you're winning or you're not.
Those are the economics that every VC asks for. You either good or not. It's like defined.
Totally.
Yes.
So the more important aspect in my mind is, once you've got that core ICP, what is your growth rate within those folks? Like, what is the expansion, the upsell, the cross-sell, the ability to extract more value from the relationship that you've already built?
Because it costs you so much to get that already. Can you get more out of them?
That's exactly the name of the game.
Yeah.
And that is actually, it's a kind of a multi-dimensional win, because if you can build an engine that allows you to be able to upgrade your best customers, they also tend to stick around longer.
Right.
Like when I was...
They're invested.
Yeah. When I was at LogMeIn, we had this host of products, and it became really clear for us, if we could get somebody to use more than 3 products from us, they never left. Like, we never saw churn. So that just became a bar that we would use to be able to metric our team to say, like, hey, have we done enough to be able to drive penetration of our products within our existing customer base? So like that upsell, cross-sell motion, doubly important. And as soon as I'm coming into an organization, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we juice that up? How do we give those people that have selected us an opportunity to select more from us? And then the third piece is retention. It's a lagging indicator. It's like something that you don't necessarily know until somebody has an opportunity to churn.
Yeah.
A lot of these businesses have this kind of, especially when they start, like a lot of monthly agreements. And so you do get some pretty early signals around, like, hey, are we doing things that are pushing too hard, that are impacting churn? Is it churn in the right types of customers with our ICP versus just churn for the other customers that we probably shouldn't be having? But ultimately, to be able to make sure that you're retaining logos at an exceedingly high rate is the name of the game. Like, you have to, as a revenue leader, think about your customer base as a basket of stocks. And that basket is either getting more valuable or less valuable over time.
Interesting.
And if those folks are leaving your basket, that basket of stocks is definitely going to get less valuable if they're the right types of customers.
But now in today's, where we are right now, which is August 23rd, 2023, like this is the doldrums. We're officially in kind of the darkest times in the last 15 years, 10 years, I guess you could call early 2010s as challenging as well. But as churn as being the highest out there, and rep efficiency at being the lowest marks, and close rates being at the lowest marks, in specifically the technology sector, there's other sectors like fintech and healthcare surrounding kind of infrastructure plays that are happening. AI is starting to be the theme, which we have thoughts around that, but that's for another episode. Ultimately, when you look at companies and almost the situation of trading revenue right now, right? Because you have a lot of churn happening in a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses have made the decision to go up market, which fundamentally in PLG businesses is very difficult, right? Airtable kind of went through the same thing. They go, when you were there, they're like, hey, we're going to go up market now. And they had one of the best NRRs in the universe, and ultimately had one of the best like viral tools out there of getting more users. And so when you make the mindset and the change around going up market and trading SMB revenue or user-based revenue for more, that's very much like a big focus of what we're seeing today. And I guess, our experience early in our careers is much different than today. So if you were to give advice around the things happening to the listeners today, what advice would you give around those metrics that you talked about and measurement around that? Because it's all bad right now. It's not.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did well at Airtable was think about segmenting our customer base and really understanding within the holistic customer base which are the customers that we wanted to invest more time with, invest more dollars with, because of the growth potential associated with those accounts. And over the long term, if you can continue to grow those companies and they continue to retain, and again, those forces work together, because if they're buying more, their likelihood of retention is going to be increased by that. But it's just a much more efficient machine over time. And if I was kind of in that doldrum of trying to figure out, like, how do I get through this next 12 months? How do I survive? I'd take a really hard look at your existing customer base and spend time understanding, what am I giving them an opportunity to purchase that is of value, and how have I built my organization to go and capture that value? Like, spend time talking to customers around the value that they're getting. Spend time explaining to them that there is more value to be had here if they were to invest more. Like, focus on those people, right? It's just such an advantage, I think, as an outside investor looking at a business, if they have a clear sense of, here is where we're successful, here is where we are unassailable, and our future, right?
Right.
And do you have the capital to go out and win all the other companies that look like that right now? Maybe not.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's okay. That's what more capital is for. But an investor and an executive like myself wants to know that you have a sense of like where you can be dominant and where you can be successful. Yeah. And so I think that's the job to be done in the near term. Like the playbook of like, hey, we're going to just grow top line and eventually that growth will turn into profitable growth. You kind of have to retire that for the near term.
The time being at least.
Absolutely.
And these businesses are going to be healthier as they get out of the cycle, right? Because
100%.
I mean, even when you look at companies like Postal that raise, a good amount of money when it comes to Series A and Series B, and then we're going through this period of time where we had massive growth. The next thing you know, it's looking very different right now. Yeah. You always have to forgive growth. Say, you know what, growth is not important to us right now. Showing that we have the future growth opportunity with the right customers is the right way now. Totally. And I think that is just a fundamental change on executives and how they look at business. Before it was like, I don't care who the business is. We're going to get them in here. It doesn't matter how much they cost to get in here. We're just going to get them and get after the greenfield and try to get to profitability or like fix our churn to some other time. And now it's just like, no, like that has definitely changed altogether. And because money is not accessible anymore, you have to have the best businesses. And now really best businesses, best markets win. Yeah. And I think that's
the challenge in that world though, is like, you still got to grow,
Right.
And like,
but not at the double, triple or the triple, double or whatever, right?
Sure,
like, you still have to grow. You can't be losing.
Right. And that's where I think you've got a lot of founders and executives who are stuck basically saying like, look, I get it. Like, let me double down on my best customers, but I
still need top of the funnel.
Do my customers actually have an ability to get me to top line growth?
Yeah.
Right. Can I make up for the churn that I'm seeing in my customer base through expansion? Could I just focus there and make that work? And for a lot of companies, it's not an option.
Yeah.
And so then what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Where do you go next?
Yeah.
And I think there's also this really challenging situation right now where a lot of folks are running out of capital and they're burning and they're like, oh crap, do I invest in more sales resources to be able to get cash receivables?
Yeah. Cash collections are king right now.
Cash collections are king right now. But if I do that, then I'm going to have to outlay capital to be able to bring on more salespeople.
And efficiency is all wonky. Close rates are all wonky.
Yeah. And so right now, when you're like the wartime president, like there are a lot of tough decisions to be made. And so that's where I think a systematic process of being able to say, look, if we're building something that's focused on this core ICP and we can win more of those core ICP and we're going to win fewer of them and growth is going to be like tepid at best, but we're going to still be positive, like that's a win for a lot of companies.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. Thank you for that. Last one, Whiskey Mule, and we're going to finish it up with the best experiment that you ever ran. So this podcast fundamentally is about trying new things and especially these drinks that we're drinking. This is, I know this is going to be my favorite. Big ginger fan over here. So let's talk about experimentation and the best experiment that you run. Except for, hiring me was one of those experiments. So we could just say that. Gotcha.
By the way, the ginger is like forward on the nose. I didn't.
Did that come out
because of that? But it was like it almost came out my nose. All right. The best experiment. Okay, here's a fun one, and I spent a fair amount of time recently talking to people about this. When we were working at Wrike, one of the things that we realized is that we were in a very competitive marketplace. When people were taking a trial of our product or using our product, they were often trying a different product at the same time in the same category, like 2 or 3 products, right? And
different divisions were using different products.
Divisions were using different, but I'm talking about like same person that's coming into the funnel, looking at multiple products, trying to decide which was the right one for us.
Yep.
The days of people just doing one evaluation are probably over, right? Because it's so easy to be able to get to all these different products. And so it's just like, hey, I'm going to figure out which one do I like best. So we had this premise that if we could shrink time to first contact, it would make a pretty massive difference in conversion rates. Yep. And so we ran a test, and lo and behold, it had a massive impact. It was like 3x our conversion rate if we were the first company to talk to that potential buyer versus the second or third company.
Hey, do you remember what we implemented for that?
Yeah. You want to talk about it?
That was when we met Manny Medina at Outreach, and he had started Outreach. And the only reason we went with Outreach and not Yesware was because we could trigger that email sequence to happen upon that lead getting into Salesforce.
I wasn't going to go with that, but that's a good shout out for Manny.
Not even a shout out. That was when we did that. That helped us get to the first contact, right? But you wanted people calling. You could talk about the yes.
Like it's not good enough in my mind to send an email to somebody to show them that you're interested in engaging with them. What we were always after was being able to have a conversation to set the criteria for how a decision was made on a product in that category. Imagine being able to come into a conversation and educate a buyer on, hey, when you're looking at a project management technology, you should be looking at these types of things. This is what we've seen historically. Yeah. One of the things that most companies are concerned about are Gantt charts. Insert, seemingly lame feature. But if you can start setting the expectation that if you're buying a technology in this category and you don't have a Gantt chart, like it's not even really a choice, that allows you to be able to incept the unfair advantage that your business has relative to your competition.
Right.
So that's why I always wanted to be the first to the conversation. The second piece, though, is operationalizing that is difficult. You and I grew up in a world of, hey, you've got sales reps that are assigned to specific territories. There's a bunch of advantages around that.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If it's all about like speed to lead and you've got somebody that's out to lunch, well, they're not going to be very quick to that lead because they got to eat their lunch and they've got to follow up on their email. And so the process and the systems necessary to be able to really maximize for that were not in place. And so that's where one of our sales ops people and I were working through this idea of a pull mechanism for leads.
Yeah.
It's like, as a sales rep, log into Salesforce, put yourself in an active status. You then have access to the queue of leads.
Yep.
And we're going to route the best lead to you as your next conversation to be had.
Yep.
And we're going to measure how long does it take from pull to conversation. And then secondarily, that gives you this really interesting mechanism for being able to do gamification.
Yep.
It's like, hey, I'm giving the best people in our organization that have the highest close rate the opportunity to be able to get those best leads first.
Yeah.
Obviously, that only works when you have a certain amount of scale. But those are the types of things that I loved because that allowed us to be able to run a lot of experiments in that one really refined space towards the objective function of our business, which was let's increase conversion rate as much as we possibly can.
It's awesome. Well, we're at time.
Great.
Appreciate you, man.
I can't believe that I drank whiskey at 10:30.
Well, you know what? Welcome to slow.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lifestyle.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us in our first episode. Thanks to Rotten Hammers and their delicious whiskey drinks. Favorite one?
I think it was the Paloma.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thank you, and join us for the next episode. We out.